There comes a moment, quiet, unannounced, when the soul grows tired of shrinking to fit someone else's pride. A moment when your silence begins to feel louder than their words, and your worth refuses to beg for recognition. You see, the ego is a fragile throne, built not on strength, but on the illusion that you will always stay, always explain, always return. But the day you rise, gracefully, unapologetically, and walk away, something shifts. Not in you, for you have already awakened, but in them, because your absence speaks a truth their ego cannot bear to hear, that you were never theirs to control, only strong enough to leave. There is a kind of strength the world does not always applaud. It does not shout, it does not argue, it does not demand to be seen. It simply rises, gathers what remains of its dignity, and leaves, quietly, without spectacle, without the need to prove anything to anyone. And yet in that quiet departure, there is a power so profound, it unsettles those who never believed you would find it. For so long, people mistake endurance for loyalty. They believe that if you stay through the disregard, the half-love, the subtle disrespect, then somehow you are strong. But there comes a point where staying begins to erode the very foundation of who you are. And in that moment, walking away is not an escape, it is a return to yourself, to your worth, to the voice inside you that has been whispering, you deserve more than this. What makes this departure so powerful is not just the act itself, but the silence that carries it. You do not argue your case. You do not plead to be understood. You do not exhaust your spirit trying to fix what was never yours to fix. Instead, you choose peace over explanation. And that choice, that calm refusal to engage in the noise, becomes something they cannot easily dismiss. Because the truth is, ego feeds on reaction. It thrives on your need to be heard, on your willingness to stay and convince, to explain, to fight for a place that was never fully offered to you. But when you withdraw that energy, when you stop feeding the very thing that once held power over you, it begins to weaken. Not because you attacked it, but because you simply refuse to sustain it any longer. And there is a certain grace in that refusal. A grace in knowing that not every battle requires your presence, not every misunderstanding deserves your voice. Sometimes, the most powerful statement you can make is your absence. It leaves behind questions they cannot answer, a silence they cannot fill, and a realization they cannot ignore. Walking away, then, is not about giving up. It is about choosing yourself in a world that often asks you to choose others at your own expense. It is about understanding that your value does not decrease because someone failed to recognize it. And it is about carrying yourself with a quiet confidence that does not seek validation, but simply exists, unshaken and whole. So when you walk away, do not see it as a loss. See it as a reclaiming. A quiet, unwavering declaration that you will no longer settle for less than what your spirit knows it deserves. And in that silence, in that steady and graceful exit, you will discover a power that no one can take from you, because it was yours all along. There is a quiet truth many come to learn too late, that not every conflict is meant to be solved with words, and not every person is meant to be understood through explanation. Some egos do not listen, they consume. They feed on your reactions, your emotions, your need to be heard. Every time you defend yourself, every time you try to prove your worth, you unknowingly offer them exactly what they crave, your energy, your attention, your presence. And so the cycle continues. You speak, they dismiss, you explain, they twist, you react, and they grow stronger in their certainty that they still hold power over you. Not because they are right, but because you are still there, still engaging, still pouring pieces of yourself into a space that was never meant to hold you with care. It is not the volume of your voice that sustains them. It is the fact that you have not walked away. But something changes when you begin to understand the weight of your own attention. When you realize that your reactions are not obligations, but choices. And in that realization, you start to see the quiet strength in withholding what was once freely given. You begin to understand that your silence is not emptiness, it is control. It is the gentle reclaiming of a power you did not know you had surrendered. When you stop reacting, the dynamic shifts in ways words never could. There is no argument left to win, no emotion left to manipulate, no response left to twist into something it was never meant to be. And in that stillness, their ego begins to search for the very thing it once relied on: you, your voice, your frustration, your need to engage. But when it finds nothing, when it is met with calm absence instead of resistance, it begins to weaken under the weight of its own emptiness. This is not about punishment or revenge. It is not about proving a point or making someone feel small. It is about recognizing that you were never meant to be a source of fuel for someone else's pride. Your peace is not a bargaining chip, and your attention is not something to be earned through manipulation or disregard. It is yours to give, and just as importantly, yours to withdraw. There is a certain dignity in no longer responding to what disturbs your spirit, a quiet confidence in choosing stillness over chaos, distance over dysfunction. And while they may not understand your silence, while they may question your absence, what truly unsettles them is not what you have done, but what you have stopped doing. You are no longer reacting, no longer feeding the cycle, no longer playing a role in a story that diminished you. And in that space, you find something far greater than validation. You find freedom. Freedom from the need to explain, to defend, to be seen by those who refuse to see you clearly. Because the moment you stop reacting is the moment you start reclaiming yourself. And that is a power no ego can survive without. There is something quietly radical about choosing yourself in a world that has taught you to endure everything but your own truth. From the very beginning, you are told that strength looks like staying, that loyalty means tolerating, that love requires sacrifice, and that walking away is a sign of weakness. So you learn to bend, to adjust, to silence the parts of you that ache for more, all in the name of keeping peace that was never truly yours. But there comes a moment, deep and undeniable, when your spirit begins to resist that narrative. A moment when the weight of staying feels heavier than the fear of leaving. And in that moment, choosing yourself becomes more than a decision. It becomes a quiet rebellion against everything that tried to convince you that your needs were too much, your standards too high, your worth too inconvenient. Walking away, then, is not simply an act of departure. It is an act of courage that often goes unseen and uncelebrated, because it does not come with applause or immediate understanding. In fact, it is often met with confusion, resistance, even judgment. People may question your choice, may try to pull you back into the familiar, may label your strength as selfishness. But what they fail to see is the cost it took for you to finally stand up and say, enough. Choosing yourself means you are no longer willing to be the place where disrespect feels comfortable. It means you refuse to stay in spaces where your presence is taken for granted and your silence is expected. And that refusal disrupts more than just the moment. It disrupts the expectations others had of you. Expectations that you would continue to tolerate, continue to give, continue to stay, no matter how much it diminished you. There is a reason this choice unsettles people, because when you decide to no longer suffer in silence, you hold up a mirror to those who benefited from it. Your departure forces a truth they may not be ready to face, that their comfort was built on your compromise. And when that foundation is removed, their sense of control begins to falter. Yet even in that, your decision is not about them. It is about you reclaiming a life that feels honest, a space where your voice does not have to shrink to be accepted. It is about understanding that your peace is not something you should have to fight for. It is something you deserve to live within. And sometimes the only way to find that peace is to walk away from what consistently disturbs it. There is no loud declaration in this kind of strength, no need to prove or persuade. It lives in the quiet certainty of your steps, in the way you no longer look back for permission or validation. It is a steady, grounded knowing that you have chosen what is right for your soul, even if it is difficult, even if it is lonely at first. And that is the true revolution, not in changing others, but in finally choosing not to abandon yourself. There is a quiet illusion that control creates, a fragile belief that if someone can predict your reactions, influence your emotions, or keep you within reach, then somehow they own a part of you, not in words, not in truth, but in habit, in pattern, in the unspoken expectation that no matter what happens, you will remain. And for a while, it may even feel real. You adjust yourself to avoid conflict. You soften your voice to keep peace. You stay longer than you should, because leaving feels heavier than enduring. But control is not always loud. It does not always arrive with commands or force. Sometimes it comes disguised as familiarity, as emotional dependence, as the quiet shaping of your choices, until you begin to forget what it feels like to choose freely. You start to move carefully, speak cautiously, exist within invisible boundaries you did not consciously agree to. And over time, they begin to believe those boundaries define you. What they fail to understand is that control only survives through your participation. It depends on your willingness to stay, to respond, to keep showing up in the same way. The moment you begin to question it, the moment you feel the discomfort of being confined, something within you starts to shift. You begin to see that what once felt like connection may have been constraint, that what felt like stability may have been limitation. And then comes the moment that changes everything, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a quiet certainty. You step back, you pause, you choose not to react the way you always have. And in that small, powerful decision, the illusion begins to crack. Because control cannot survive where there is unpredictability, where there is distance, where there is a refusal to play the expected role. When you walk away, you are not just leaving a person or a situation, you are stepping outside of a structure that once defined how you were seen and how you behaved. And that is what unsettles them. Not your absence alone, but the loss of certainty, the loss of knowing how to reach you, how to affect you, how to pull you back into a pattern that once felt unbreakable. There is a kind of freedom in becoming unfamiliar to those who thought they had you figured out, in no longer responding the same way, no longer bending in the same places, no longer offering access to parts of you that were never meant to be controlled. And in that freedom, you begin to rediscover something essential, the truth that you were never meant to be managed, shaped, or contained by someone else's expectations. This is not rebellion for the sake of defiance. It is alignment. It is the quiet return to your own center, where your choices are no longer influenced by fear of reaction or desire for approval. It is the understanding that your life is not something to be negotiated for the comfort of others, but something to be lived with honesty and self-respect. And as you continue to walk forward, something remarkable happens. The power they once believed they held does not transfer. It does not shift. It simply disappears, because it was never truly theirs to begin with. It existed only in the space where you allowed it. And now, with every step you take away, you reclaim that space, not with force, but with truth. There is a kind of dignity that does not announce itself, that does not arrive with raised voices or final words meant to wound. It moves quietly, with steady breath and unshaken steps, choosing peace over performance. In a world that often confuses loudness with strength, there is something deeply powerful about the person who decides They will not turn their pain into a spectacle just to be understood. It is easy, almost instinctive, to want to explain yourself when you have been misunderstood, to defend your heart when it has been mishandled, to speak every truth that sits heavy on your chest. You want them to see it, to finally understand what they could not, or would not, see before. But dignity whispers something different. It reminds you that not every truth needs an audience, and not every ending requires a closing argument. There is grace in recognizing when words will no longer build bridges, only prolong the distance. When explanations become invitations for more confusion, more dismissal, more unnecessary pain. And so, instead of exhausting yourself trying to be heard in a place that has refused to listen, you choose silence, not as surrender, but as self-respect. Walking away without drama does not mean you feel nothing. It does not mean you were unaffected, untouched, or unhurt. It means you have decided that your healing matters more than your need to be understood, that your peace is worth more than the temporary satisfaction of saying everything you could say. It is the quiet decision to carry your truth with you, rather than laying it down where it will not be valued. There is a certain strength in not reacting the way they expect you to, in not matching chaos with chaos or raising your voice to meet theirs. Because drama, at its core, seeks participation. It pulls, provokes, and persists until it finds someone willing to engage. But when you step back, when you refuse to give it your energy, it loses its hold. Not because it has been defeated in a loud and visible way, but because it has been denied the attention it needs to survive. And in that denial, something shifts. They may not understand your silence. They may interpret it as indifference or even weakness. But what unsettles them is not what you say, it is what you withhold. The reaction they expected, the argument they were prepared for, the closure they assumed they would receive. Your calm departure leaves them with something far more difficult than confrontation, their own thoughts, unanswered and unresolved. Dignity does not seek to prove a point. It does not need validation or recognition. It simply exists in the way you carry yourself when you choose not to lower your standards, even when you have been wronged. It is the quiet refusal to let someone else's behavior dictate your character. The understanding that who you are is not defined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to respond. And so you leave, not in anger, not in haste, but in quiet certainty. You leave with your self-respect intact, your peace protected, and your spirit unburdened by the need to explain what should have been understood without words. And in that graceful exit, you carry something far more powerful than the last word. You carry yourself. There is a strange dependence in some people, a fragile reliance on the presence of others to sustain their sense of power. Their confidence is not born from inner strength, but from the reflection of attention they receive. Every word you offer, every reaction you give, becomes a thread holding up the fragile architecture of their ego. And as long as you remain present, responding, engaging, bending to the expectations they create, they can continue to believe that they are untouchable, that they are in control. But the moment you withdraw, the moment you stop offering what they need to feel significant, the illusion begins to crumble. It is not an explosive collapse, but a quiet unraveling, subtle yet undeniable. They may try to mask it with anger, with condescension, with accusations, but inside, the cracks are forming. Confidence that was dependent on your attention starts to falter because it never had a foundation strong enough to survive absence. This is the paradox of presence. You may have thought that staying was a gesture of loyalty, of care, of patience, and perhaps it was. But what you also offered, without realizing, was power. Power to inflate someone's sense of self at your own expense. Power to define your value through their perception. Power to rely on you as a constant source of reassurance. Walking away removes the sustenance their ego has depended upon. It does not need argument, it does not need vindication, it simply needs your absence. And in that absence, a subtle transformation occurs. You are no longer a participant in their narrative. You are no longer available to be manipulated, persuaded, or diminished. You exist on your own terms, carrying your dignity with you, unshaken by the need to defend, explain, or justify. Meanwhile, their confidence, which relied entirely on your engagement, begins to wobble. The certainty they held, the sense of control they assumed, begins to feel unstable. What is most remarkable is that this shift is not immediate in the way a confrontation is immediate. It seeps in unnoticed at first until they are left with a truth they cannot escape. They built their power on something external, and that external source is gone. No longer feeding it with your presence, their ego begins to shrink, to falter, to confront its own vulnerability. And you, in stepping back, are not acting from spite or desire for retribution. You are acting from self-respect, from understanding that your energy, your attention, your time are sacred and cannot be used as fuel for someone else's fragile pride. This is the quiet power of withdrawal. It is invisible to those who expect drama, but it is devastating to the one who depended on your constant engagement. You do not attack, you do not manipulate. You simply honor yourself, and in doing so, reveal the truth that their confidence was never real. It was borrowed from your patience, your care, your presence, and the moment you reclaim it, the moment you stop sustaining it, the cracks become impossible to ignore. You begin to see that confidence built on dependency is never strong. It only appears strong until it faces absence, until it faces a life lived independently of another's expectations. And in walking away, you are not only freeing yourself, you are revealing, without a word, a truth that cannot be disputed. True strength does not rely on others to exist. It is silent, steady, and unshakable, and it is yours. There is a profound lesson hidden in the act of walking away, a lesson that speaks louder than any argument, louder than any demand for respect. It is not found in the words you speak, but in the boundaries you set. Every step you take away from a situation, from someone who diminishes your worth, communicates a truth that words often fail to capture, that you will not allow yourself to be treated as less than you are. Boundaries are not walls built out of anger or spite. They are markers of self-respect, quiet lines drawn to protect the dignity of your spirit. When you walk away, you teach others how to see you, how to honor you, and how to approach your presence with care. People often test limits, sometimes unintentionally, sometimes deliberately, assuming that patience or tolerance will be infinite. But your departure tells them otherwise. It is a gentle, unwavering declaration that you know your value, that you will not be bargained with, and that the treatment you accept from others is entirely your choice. Distance becomes your voice when words are insufficient, a language that even the most arrogant ego cannot ignore. There is a misconception that leaving is an act of weakness or fear. In truth, it is one of the bravest things you can do. To walk away requires awareness, clarity, and a deep connection to your own needs. It demands that you resist the pull of familiarity, of comfort, of attachment that once made enduring mistreatment seem easier than confronting it. It is a conscious act of self-preservation, of claiming the space and respect that belong to you. In doing so, you create the environment in which your peace can flourish, unshaken by the opinions or actions of others. Distance, when chosen from self-respect rather than spite, carries a transformative power. It forces reflection in those who once crossed your boundaries, revealing the truth of how they approached your presence. They may feel unsettled at first, confused by the sudden clarity you embody. But over time, the absence you leave becomes the most eloquent teacher. They begin to understand that your respect is earned not through persuasion or argument, but by honoring yourself consistently and without compromise. It is important to remember that self-respect is not negotiable. It is the foundation upon which every healthy relationship, every meaningful connection, every personal victory is built. By walking away, you refuse to trade your dignity for temporary comfort, for fleeting approval, or for validation that is not freely and fully offered. You create a distance that is not hostile, but purposeful, a distance that preserves your energy, your focus, and your emotional well-being. And in that distance, something remarkable happens. You are no longer entangled in cycles of compromise that diminish your spirit. You are no longer defined by the expectations of others. Your self-respect becomes a shield, a guiding principle, a quiet force that shapes the way people interact with you. Those who truly value you will honor it, and those who do not will confront the consequence of losing the opportunity to walk beside someone who understands their worth. Walking away is not just leaving a situation, it is standing firmly in the knowledge that your life, your energy, and your boundaries matter. It is the courage to let go of what does not serve you, the wisdom to recognize when enough is enough, and the grace to teach through action rather than argument. In creating that distance, you teach the world and yourself a lesson that is as clear as it is powerful. The way you allow others to treat you begins with the respect you refuse to compromise. There is a subtle, almost sacred transformation that begins the moment you allow yourself to let go. Healing does not come from holding on, no matter how familiar or comfortable the pain may seem. It does not come from replaying old grievances in your mind, from hoping for apologies that may never come, or from demanding acknowledgement from those who cannot give it. Healing begins in the surrender to yourself, in the gentle yet resolute act of releasing what you cannot control and what no longer serves the growth of your spirit. Every step away, no matter how small, is a declaration that your peace is worth more than the turmoil you have endured. It is a conscious choice to prioritize the well-being of your own heart over the insistence of others that you remain tethered to their drama. Each distance you create, each boundary you honor, is a brick in the foundation of your recovery. You are no longer defined by the weight of past hurt, nor by the expectations of those who failed to nurture you. You are choosing life over lingering in shadows that were never yours to carry. Letting go does not mean forgetting. It does not mean erasing experiences or pretending pain did not exist. It means seeing them for what they are, understanding their place in your journey, and deciding they will no longer hold dominion over your future. It is the realization that holding on to anger, resentment, or disappointment is not an act of strength. It is a barrier to your own liberation. True strength is found in the courage to release, in the willingness to step forward, unburdened, and in the confidence that what is meant for you will follow you naturally, without force or struggle. As you walk away, as you step into spaces that honor your growth and your dignity, you will notice a quiet power emerging. It is the power of self-reliance, of inner clarity, of a mind and heart no longer entangled with the manipulation or expectations of others. The absence of what once caused distress becomes fertile ground for joy, for creativity, for clarity, and for meaningful connections that do not demand your compromise. Healing is not passive. It is an active reclamation of your life, a conscious movement toward wholeness and freedom. In letting go, you also teach yourself the profound lesson that your peace is yours alone to protect. No one else can grant it, and no one else can take it unless you allow it. With each step away, you practice resilience, patience, and self-compassion. You learn that the power of presence is not in clinging to what drains you, but in cultivating spaces where your heart can breathe. And in time, the burden that once seemed inescapable begins to dissolve, replaced by a sense of quiet strength that no external force can shake. The act of leaving, of releasing, is a testament to your awareness that life is too vast, too beautiful, and too fleeting to remain bound to situations or people who diminish you. Healing begins where you let go, and every step you take is a step closer to a life that reflects your true value, your inner power, and the peace you have always deserved. Each moment of courage in releasing what harms you becomes a seed for growth, and with patience and self-trust, it blooms into the freedom and fulfillment that have always been your birthright.